Have you ever wondered why cancer seems to be everywhere today? We blame fast food, pollution, cigarettes, chemicals, modern life itself. It's a comforting explanation because it suggests that if we could somehow return to a simpler past, cancer might disappear with it. But what if that belief is wrong? What if cancer didn't begin in crowded cities or polluted factories? What if it existed long before roads, hospitals, or even written language? Imagine an archaeologist carefully brushing away layers of sand from a human skeleton that has remained untouched for thousands of years. At first glance, the bones look ordinary. Then something unusual appears. A strange hole in the skull. An abnormal growth on a rib. Tiny scars hidden deep inside the bone. These aren't injuries from war. They aren't signs of animal attacks. They're clues. Clues that may point to one of humanity's oldest enemies. For centuries, people assumed cancer was a disease of modern civilization. After all, humans today live longer than ever before, breathe polluted air, eat processed foods, and are surrounded by countless chemicals our ancestors never encountered. It seems logical to conclude that cancer must be the price we pay for modern progress. But science has a habit of challenging what seems obvious. Over the past few decades, archaeologists, paleopathologists, and medical researchers have uncovered evidence that forces us to rethink the entire story. The deeper they dug into the past, the stranger the mystery became. Because signs of cancer weren't appearing only in recent skeletons. They were appearing in people who lived thousands of years ago. Some discoveries pushed the timeline back even further. Far beyond civilization. Far beyond farming. Far beyond history itself. If that's true, then an uncomfortable question emerges. If ancient humans developed cancer without cigarettes, processed food, industrial pollution, or modern lifestyles, what actually causes it? To answer that question, we first have to understand something surprising. Cancer isn't a single disease. It's a name we give to hundreds of different diseases that all begin in remarkably similar ways. Every second of every day, trillions of cells inside your body are dividing, replacing old cells with new ones. It's an astonishing process that keeps you alive without you ever noticing it. Normally, each cell follows strict biological instructions. Grow, divide, repair damage, and when its job is finished, die. Your body is constantly policing this process. Damaged cells are repaired. Dangerous cells are destroyed. Specialized genes act like brakes, preventing uncontrolled growth before it can begin. Most of the time, this system works so well that we never realize how many potential cancers are stopped before they even start. But perfection doesn't exist in biology. Every time a cell copies its DNA, there's a tiny chance that something will go wrong. Usually, those mistakes are harmless. Sometimes they're repaired immediately. Sometimes the damaged cell destroys itself. But on rare occasions, a mutation slips through every layer of protection. The cell no longer obeys the rules. Instead of stopping, it keeps dividing. Instead of helping the body, it begins serving only itself. That is where cancer begins. Not with pollution. Not with modern technology. But with one of the oldest biological risks of multicellular life. Because cancer arises from the same cellular machinery that allows multicellular organisms to grow and repair themselves, the risk of cancer has likely existed for as long as complex multicellular life has existed. That realization changes everything. If cancer is rooted in the fundamental biology of living organisms, then perhaps humans were never the first to experience it. And that's exactly what scientists began to investigate. They searched not just through ancient cemeteries, but through fossils that had survived for millions of years. What they found would completely transform our understanding of this disease. Some of the earliest evidence didn't belong to kings, or farmers, or even humans. It belonged to creatures that walked the earth long before our species ever existed. And those discoveries reveal that cancer's story begins in a world almost impossible to imagine. So, how do you prove that someone who died thousands, or even millions, of years ago had cancer? It sounds almost impossible. After all, cancer is often called a disease of soft tissue. It attacks organs like the lungs, liver, breast, and brain, parts of the body that almost never survive long enough to become fossils. Bones, however, tell a different story. When certain cancers spread, they can leave unmistakable marks on the skeleton. Some eat away at the bone, creating small holes. Others stimulate abnormal growth, leaving behind unusual patterns that trained specialists can recognize. But recognizing those patterns isn't as simple as looking at an old skeleton. Scientists have to rule out everything else first. Could the damage have been caused by an infection, a nutritional deficiency, an injury, or even thousands of years of erosion after burial? Only after carefully eliminating those possibilities can researchers begin to suspect cancer. This field of science has a name: paleopathology, the study of diseases in ancient human and animal remains. For decades, paleopathologists have examined skeletons, mummies, and fossils, searching for traces of illnesses that shaped lives long before modern medicine existed. Sometimes, the evidence is frustratingly incomplete. But every so often, a discovery changes everything. One of the most remarkable examples came from ancient Egypt. For centuries, Egypt's dry desert climate has preserved human remains unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. Mummies still contain skin, muscles, and even internal organs, giving scientists an extraordinary opportunity to study diseases that would normally disappear with time. When researchers began scanning some of these mummies using modern medical imaging, they found something unexpected. Signs consistent with tumors. In some cases, destructive lesions in bone suggested cancers that had spread through the body. Other remains revealed abnormalities that closely matched diseases doctors diagnose in hospitals today. The people wrapped in linen more than 3,000 years ago were suffering from illnesses we often think of as uniquely modern. Yet Egypt also revealed another puzzle. Compared with today's populations, confirmed cases of cancer were surprisingly rare. At first glance, that seemed to support the idea that cancer was uncommon in the ancient world. But was it really? Or were scientists simply looking at an incomplete picture? Think about the average lifespan in many ancient societies. Many people never reached old age. Some died from infections that are easily treated today. Others died during childbirth, from injuries, famine, or violence. Cancer is strongly linked to aging because the longer we live, the more opportunities our cells have to accumulate genetic mistakes. If a large portion of a population dies young, many people simply never live long enough to develop the cancers we commonly see today. In other words, fewer recorded cancers in ancient remains don't necessarily mean cancer hardly existed. It may simply mean that far fewer people survived into the ages where many cancers become more common. Then there's another problem. Most cancers leave no trace on bone at all. A person could die from cancer affecting the stomach, pancreas, or lungs, and centuries later, their skeleton might appear perfectly normal. Unless soft tissue is preserved, as it occasionally is in mummies, those cancers become almost invisible to history. That means the archaeological record almost certainly underestimates how often cancer occurred in ancient populations. In science, absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. As researchers improved their tools, the discoveries became even more convincing. High-resolution CT scans began revealing hidden abnormalities inside ancient bones without damaging priceless remains. Microscopic analysis allowed scientists to distinguish between disease, injury, and natural weathering. Even advanced chemical techniques started helping researchers understand how ancient diseases progressed. Each technological breakthrough peeled back another layer of the mystery. Then came a discovery that reached even further into the past. In 2016, researchers reported evidence of what is considered one of the oldest known malignant tumors found in a human ancestor. The fossil belonged to Australopithecus sediba, a close relative of modern humans that lived nearly 2 million years ago in what is now South Africa. Scientists identified a bone tumor known as an osteosarcoma, a type of aggressive bone cancer that still affects people today. The finding was astonishing. It showed that cancer was affecting members of our evolutionary family long before agriculture, cities, industry, or modern pollution ever existed. Of course, one fossil doesn't prove that cancer was common. Scientists are careful not to make that leap. Instead, it proves something equally important. The biological machinery capable of producing cancer already existed deep in our evolutionary past. But if ancient human relatives could develop cancer, an even bigger question remained unanswered. Were humans the first living creatures to face this disease? Or had cancer already been written into the story of life millions of years before our ancestors ever walked the earth? The answer would come from a discovery so unexpected that it changed not only medicine, but our understanding of evolution itself. If cancer existed in ancient humans, then one final mystery remained. How far back does its story really go? To answer that, scientists had to look beyond humanity itself. Far beyond the first villages. Far beyond the first stone tools. Back to a world ruled by creatures unlike anything alive today. For years, researchers believed cancer was mostly a problem of modern humans because our lives had become longer and more complex. But fossils were beginning to tell a different story. One of the most fascinating discoveries came from the age of the dinosaurs. At first, the idea sounded unbelievable. How could anyone diagnose cancer in an animal that died more than 70 million years ago? The answer came through modern imaging technology. Researchers used CT scans to examine fossilized bones without damaging them. Hidden inside were unusual growths and destructive patterns that closely resembled tumors seen in living animals today. Among the most well-known examples were duck-billed dinosaurs known as hadrosaurs. Several fossils showed evidence of tumors, including benign growths and, in some cases, signs consistent with malignant disease. These discoveries didn't prove that dinosaurs suffered from cancer at the same rates as humans. But they proved something remarkable. The biological processes that can lead to cancer were already present tens of millions of years before our own species appeared. And dinosaurs weren't the only ones. Scientists have identified tumors in ancient reptiles, prehistoric mammals, and many living animals, from dogs and cats to elephants and even whales. Cancer is not uniquely human. It is a disease that can affect many forms of complex multicellular life. That realization forced scientists to rethink one of the biggest assumptions about the disease. If cancer has existed for millions of years, why does it seem so much more common today? The answer isn't simple. Modern life does play a role. Smoking dramatically increases the risk of lung cancer. Excessive ultraviolet radiation increases the risk of skin cancer. Certain viruses, alcohol consumption, obesity, and exposure to some environmental chemicals are also linked to higher risks of specific cancers. These are conclusions supported by decades of medical research. But those factors don't create cancer from nothing. They increase the chances that the natural process of genetic mutations will overwhelm the body's defenses. In other words, modern life can add fuel to the fire. It didn't light the fire in the first place. There's another reason cancer appears more common today. We are living longer than almost any generation in human history. A century ago, many people died from infectious diseases that are now preventable or treatable. Today, advances in sanitation, vaccines, antibiotics, and medicine allow millions of people to reach ages where cancer becomes much more likely. Ironically, one reason we see more cancer is because humanity has become far better at surviving everything else. Our ability to detect cancer has also improved dramatically. Ancient physicians had no CT scanners, no MRI machines, no biopsies, no genetic testing. Today, doctors can identify cancers that would have gone completely unnoticed just a few generations ago. So when we compare the present with the distant past, we must be careful. We're not simply comparing two different worlds. We're comparing two very different levels of medical knowledge. The ancient world did not escape cancer. It simply understood it far less. And perhaps that is the most surprising discovery of all. Cancer was never waiting for factories to appear. It was already part of life's story, hidden within the very biology that allows living things to grow, heal, and survive. But if that's true, what does this
ancient disease ultimately teach us about ourselves? The answer is more hopeful than you might expect.
So, did ancient humans have cancer? The evidence says yes. Not as frequently as we see today, and not for the same reasons in every case, but cancer was already present long before modern civilization. Archaeological remains, ancient mummies, and even fossils of our evolutionary relatives show that this disease is far older than cities, factories, or processed food. Modern life has undoubtedly changed the picture. Longer lifespans, tobacco use, obesity, certain infections, environmental exposures, and improved detection have all contributed to the number of cancer diagnoses we see today. But none of that means cancer itself is new. Perhaps the greatest lesson is this. Cancer is not simply a disease of the modern world. It is a consequence of the extraordinary complexity of life itself. The very cells that allow us to grow, heal, and survive also carry the possibility that, one day, something may go wrong. The story of cancer is, in many ways, the story of life, of evolution, adaptation, and the delicate balance that has existed for millions of years. The next time someone says cancer is only a modern disease, remember the silent evidence hidden in ancient bones, preserved mummies, and fossils that have waited millions of years to tell their story. Sometimes, the oldest mysteries reveal the newest truths. Every question has an answer.
If this documentary has changed the way you see history, like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Hidden Origin for more incredible discoveries.